In this video, I want to talk briefly about Jesus mythicism. Now, I find that a lot of Christians kind of just jump in and want to interact with Jesus mythicists without taking the first step of setting up just how extraordinarily implausible this view is. In fact, how it really conforms to classic conspiracy thinking. So that's what I want to do in this video. First thing I want to note is that Jesus mythicists make an initially extraordinary claim, the claim that a person that many historians believe is among the most influential human persons in all history, they claim that he never existed. Now, on the face of it, that is a claim that is about as extraordinary as saying that the moon landing actually occurred at a studio in Hollywood rather than on the moon. That's the kind of territory we're into. Next thing, note that of the scholars who endorse Jesus mythicists in the relevant fields who have terminal degrees, that is PhDs, the relevant fields being sort of ancient history, New Testament studies, classics, uh, less than 1% of scholars in those fields would hold the Jesus mythicist view or really even take it seriously. In fact, I think you could count on one, maybe two hands, the number of individuals who meet those criteria, such as Richard Carrier, Raphael Latester, Robert Price. Next, note that of those scholars who've actually published peer-reviewed books that have passed muster with other academics and been vetted by them, you have, I think, only two books. Books published by Richard Carrier and Raphael Latester. Next thing, note that each one of those individuals is an outspoken atheist activist who is openly hostile toward Christianity, regularly engages in debates with Christians. Um, that should tell you something as well. So let's pull back now and change that context. Imagine that we're talking about human-induced climate change, and the only climatologists with PhDs in climatology who deny human-induced climate change, there's about 5 of them, let's say, and they all happen to be on the payroll of big oil companies like Exxon and Shell. How skeptical would you be of those 5 scholars and their views? I mean, I think you'd be very skeptical, and rightly so. Uh, you don't deny or reject the consensus of 99% of scholars and plus and go with this tiny minority with clear vested interests for just no reason at all. Now, the last thing I want to note is that Jesus mythicists do what conspiracy theorists generally do, which is they then provide some really lame reasons just to kind of marginalize, reject, ignore the entire overwhelming consensus of scholarship on a particular issue. For example, Jesus mythicists will often make sweeping claims about how, well, all of those other scholars, they're all just corrupted by religion, dogma, pressured by religious institutions to toe the theological line on particular issues. You actually have to take a look, however, at the diversity of these fields, ancient history, New Testament studies, to appreciate just how ridiculous that claim is. The field is full of a diversity of theological perspectives. So you have some conservative scholars, let's say Richard Bauckham, or maybe new N.T. Wright is relatively conservative. But you also have sort of more liberal, let's say Catholic scholar like Luke Timothy Johnson. You have Jewish scholars like Mark Nanos. You have agnostics like Bart Ehrman. You have atheists like Gerhard Ludemann. None of those people in these fields take Jesus mythicism seriously as a real intellectually viable position. As well, the institutions for which these people teach. I mean, there are some institutions that are relatively conservative in terms of their doctrinal perspectives, some conservative seminaries, some Bible colleges. But I think the vast majority, in my impression, of institutions that employ these scholars are like public universities. They are institutions that don't impose any sort of theological obligations on these individuals. So to dismiss the 99% plus of scholars and the position they take relative to the existence of Jesus, because they are somehow corrupted by some shadowy theological magisterium that is imposing doctrine on them. This is, again, back into the realm of just bald conspiracy theorization. And so now we're back again on the soundstage of Burbank, California, claiming that, in fact, the moon landing happened here rather than on the moon. Now, there's this popular saying of many atheists like to toss around, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of that claim because I think really all it ends up saying in many cases is your evidence isn't extraordinary enough for me, so it's not good. But nonetheless, there is some wisdom in that little maxim, that it is kind of pointing out that when you have an initially extraordinary claim, you do have to look for some good evidence to consider that claim. And I will just say this, that just as denial of the moon landing is an extraordinary claim, so denial of the historical existence of Jesus is an extraordinary claim. Feel free then to get into the weeds debating with Jesus mythicists if you want. Just appreciate that you are really engaging with a position that is pretty much an extraordinary conspiracy theory held by a tiny minority of activist atheist scholars and a lot of YouTubers as well.